Good day to you. God bless you. Say, welcome to the Shepherd's Chapel. Welcome to this family Bible study hour. Hey, we're ready to get cracking back in our Father's Word. Book of Kings. I mean a chronological order of events as they actually transpired. At the same time, bringing forth types that you can learn from today. Especially when it has to do with Elijah and Elisha, inasmuch as we know that Elijah would return in the end generation, that he would turn the hearts of the children back to the fathers, plural. So anything that has to do with that type, you want to really pay attention. Now, we've had many events. Elijah, of course, has returned to the Father, and Elisha has taken his place. He asked a double blessing, and he was given that double blessing. We're going to pick it up, and it kind of starts a new thought in chapter 6. We need not lay any groundwork. Chapter 6, verse 1, 2 Kings, a word of wisdom from our Father. Let's go with it. And verse 1 reads, "And the sons of the prophets said unto Elisha, Behold now, the place where we dwell with thee is too strait for us." In other words, it's too little, it's too small, we're overcrowded. This also shows the poverty, perhaps, that they were in at that time. When you have kings like Ahab and queens like Jezebel, all Jezebel wanted to do was to kill the real prophets of God, and accomplished it in many cases. So I'm sure that they were running pretty close to the belt, all right? We'll put it that way. So they wanted to build a larger place. Verse 2, "Let us go, we pray thee." This would be a prophet school near the Jordan, all right? "We pray thee unto Jordan, and take thence every man a beam." Now that's a log, all right? Hewn log. "And let us make us a place there, where we may dwell." And he answered, "Go ye." And remember, wherever a prophet goes, or a believer of God, where he goes, God goes also. Because it's basically God's mouthpiece on earth at this time. A prophet that wears the mantle, that makes a big difference. Okay, verse 3. "And one said, Be content, I pray thee, and go with thy servants. Come go with us, Elisha. And he answered, I will go." So naturally, with Elisha wearing the mantle, God went with them all as well. Verse 4. "So he went with them, and when they came to Jordan," that's the descender in the Hebrew tongue, "they cut down wood." They cut down some trees, made the logs, 5. "But as one was felling a beam, the axe head flew into the water, and he cried and said, Alas, master, for it was borrowed." Now, I hate to give the higher critics any time, but many higher critics claim he really said, "I begged it." Prophets, this is something that you must understand. Prophets do not beg. God is against his prophets begging. God wants to take care of them himself. And it was borrowed. That's why he was concerned. A prophet has compassion. And today, if you borrow something and lose it, even if you could replace it, it's still not the same one you borrowed. And you don't like to borrow something and have to return something in its place, ever. Now, if you've ever lived in a country where neighbors do borrow things occasionally, you'll know exactly what I mean. So God is against his prophets begging, his ministers begging, or any of his people begging unless there is a reason for it, all right? And then that's fine. Verse 6. "And the man of God said, Where fell it?" So Elisha says, where did it hit the water? And he showed him the place, and he cut down a stick, Elisha did, and cast it in thither, and the iron did swim. Now, many people might say, well, that was another miracle. Well, it was a miracle, all right? First of all, the cut down in Hebrew is that he basically shaped it where it would fit as the handle of an axe. And when he cast it, the stick, naturally it went into the heave of the iron, and that iron in the Hebrew, axe, whatever, and it floated. But normally, if you've been around green timber that you've just cut down like a stick wouldn't float an axe, all right? If you throw an axe in the water, guess what it's going to do? It's going down, most usually. Naturally, the handle will stick up. So it was a miracle, I feel. In the first place, it would be a miracle that he could hit it. That would be sight unseen. So it was a miracle. And Robert Newton, you with Companion Bibles, even made a little poem about this. Not one concern of ours is small if we belong to him. To teach us this, the Lord of all once made the iron to swim. So I want to make the same point, and I think that's well said, is that something that might seem small to some, this man had borrowed this. And it was obvious there was poverty in the area, and it would mean a great deal to the person that he borrowed it from that he receive it back. So to him, it wasn't necessarily such a small concern, because he probably didn't have the finances to replace it with anyway. So I'm sure that sometime in your life that you've had something at the moment that seemed overwhelming, but it was very small. And the point I want you to know is that God, when it's necessary, even takes care of the small things. He does care. Well, why didn't he save the miracles for just the big stuff? Because we're small sometimes, and our problems are small. Let you know that he takes care of all your problems if you need help with them. Think about it. But don't ever forget to thank him for it. I'm sure that if you reminisce for a moment that there's not a one of you that at some time in your life when something was lost or whatever the case might be, that there was almost a miraculous finding. It just appeared, all right? And many of you, I'm sure, are aware of what I'm saying. And I think our Father cares a lot more, I don't think, I know, than what some might think. So this is out of 16 miracles, one of them, you think it was wasted on the axe handle? I don't. To me, it's a great comfort. Great comfort. Verse 7. Therefore said he, take it up to thee. And he put out his hand and took it. End of story. But it's a fantastic type that can apply to your life today concerning little things to you. I mean, it might seem very small to someone else, but to you it's very large. And then later, after it's solved, you wondered why it seemed that large. God cares for the inner emotions of those that serve him. I'll repeat that, of those that serve him. Verse 8. Then the king of Syria warred against Israel. This would have been Ben-Hadad, and took counsel with his servants, saying, in such and such a place shall be my camp. Now, first of all, this is not like an all-out war. This is a raiding party, okay? We're going to send a raiding party up into Israel. This would be much like the raiding party that captured the little Israel maid and brought her back to be a servant to Naaman's wife, all right, remember? That type of thing. We're going to send a little raiding party. We'll surprise them. And, of course, this is one of the most difficult battles types of warfare to fight against is hit and run, rebel-type attacks, all right? Verse 9, and the man of God sent unto the king of Israel, saying, beware that thou pass not such a place, for thither the Syrians are come down. They're going to send a raiding party. And of course, naturally, a good king is going to send there a party ahead of time. And when that little band of, say, 25 to 50 come over the hill, guess what? It's harvest time, all right? 10. And the king of Israel sent to the place which the man of God told him and warned him of, and saved himself there, not once, but nor twice, meaning it happened a lot of times. Every time a raiding party showed up, pow, Syria was losing men, even if it was a small raiding party. Verse 11. Therefore the heart of the king of Syria, was sore trouble for this thing. You know why? It would mean normally that you had a traitor in your group. In your planning commission, you done got yourself a spy, all right? And he called his servants and said unto them, will ye not show me which of us, included himself, which of us is for the king of Israel? Can any of you tell me who's betraying us? And it was obvious after several times that somebody was leaking the information. I mean, that in normal life, that's the way it would be. Verse 12. And one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet that is in Israel, telleth the king of Israel the words that thou speakest in thy bedchamber. He even knows what you're saying in the secrecy of your own bedchamber. He knows everything you do. Now, that would be a little concerning, would it not? Especially if you were a king of a great nation like Syria. Of course it would. Many things would go through your mind like, hey, I want that chap on my team. Hey, I want me a prophet like that. Or I want him destroyed, whichever the case may be. But you got to remember, it isn't the man. If there's anything I want you to gather from this type, it isn't the man. It's God that you're fighting against. Not fighting against Elisha, but it is God that protects Elisha. If God can tell Elisha the movements of the king of Syria, certainly Elisha is going to be told what his plans are to dispatch Elisha. Let's go with it, all right? Verse 13. And he said, go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. Now, Dothan is the place, where was it first mentioned? About Genesis, it escapes me, Genesis, where Joseph was sold by his brothers in the well. It means double well or dual well, okay? Two wells, Dothan. Same place, okay, verse 14. Therefore send he thither horses and chariots. Found him there. He sends an army this time, just about. Quite a few of them. Horses and chariots and a great host. And they came by night and compassed the city about. They sewed them in. Little old hamlet out there. And there's just a wall of troops. Verse 15. And when the servant of the man of God, that's to say Elisha's servant or minister, was risen early and gone forth, behold, an host compassed the city, both with horses and chariots. That would be like a bunch of tanks today, the equivalent thereof. Think about it. And his servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? Or what in the world are we going to do now? They're all around us. Now, there is a lesson within this type that I want you to weld in your mind. I don't want you to ever forget it. I want you to realize that many things happen that you don't know about. When it would seem that certain events transpire or take place that are very difficult to understand, you must remember you're not necessarily alone. I don't want to frighten anyone, but I want you to remember this type. And certainly there's nothing to be frightened of. It's very comforting, all right? I mean, this would be hopeless. I mean, here you got a little city of priests and prophets. They got no weapons other than maybe one sword apiece compared to chariots. Think about it. Verse 16, and he answered, fear not. That's a good thing for a prophet to say. You know, a real prophet might say that, all right? Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Always remember that. It's a real good little saying. There are more that be with us than be with them. And that holds true to this day. That's why you do not have to be afraid. For God is around us. I am that I am. That's his name. Verse 17, and Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire round about Elisha. I mean, we've got vehicles darting back and forth in that sky in a dimension that these other people can't see. You talk about war wagons. God is ready to be on the move. God is ready to protect. And it might give you a little edge on why some people see things and some people don't. Now, this is not to cover all cases, because you have got some seers that all they have to do is eat a sour pickle and maybe a little pot roast along with it, and they can see anything they want to, all right? Or old Henry, Uncle Henry, when he comes in from a toot, he might see pink elephants or no telling what. What I mean, use common sense and keep things in perspective. But there are people that can see things that God doesn't intend for someone else to see. Verse 18, and when they came down to him, Elisha prayed unto the Lord and said, smite this people, I pray thee, with blindness. And he smote them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. As Elisha requested, so it was. And that's exactly how God handles things. Now, did Elisha say, smite them with the sword of the Lord? No. He said, smite them with blindness. Watch how he handles it. You know, there's always a way. Verse 19, and Elisha said unto them, this is not the way, neither is this the city. Follow me, and I will bring you to the man whom you seek. But he led them to Samaria. Now, Elisha's lying here. I mean, he's lying up a storm. He told me, he said, this is not the town where he's at, and it was he personally that was speaking to them. And he leads them to the capital of Israel. These dodos, you know, they're ready to do battle, but they're blind now, and he leads them right into the king of Israel's camp, and they're helpless as they can be, okay, compared to their capabilities otherwise. Verse 20, and it came to pass when they were come into Samaria that Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men, that they may see. And the Lord opened their eyes, and they saw. You bet they did. And behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. They were in the middle of the enemy's camp. Though they were a great host, they were outgunned all the way around. I'm sure that was quite a sight to see old Elisha walking down the road, or whatever the case, leading the whole Syrian army that he had sent out right into the capital, and they're all just kind of hanging on and making their way there, all right? Quite a sight that must have been. God works in mysterious ways. Verse 21, and the king of Israel said unto Elisha, when he saw them, my father, and this means spiritual father, shall I smite them? Shall I smite them? I mean, they had the opportunity there. That's just like, I mean, that's like shooting fish in a barrel. You know what I mean? I mean, this is a easy task. 22, and he answered, Thou shalt not smite them. Wouldest thou smite those whom thou hast taken captive with thy sword and with thy bow? And of course the answer is no. But how were they taken captive? By spirit. In other words, you wouldn't kill them if you had taken them captive in the field honorably and brought them home with a sword. Why would you do it now when I have taken them prisoner spiritually? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their master. Now understand, we're not talking about a marauding little band here. We're talking about probably the king of Syria's main force, one of his main crack units, 23. And he prepared great provision for them, and when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. So the bands of Syria came no more into the land of Israel. That is to say, the marauding bands came no more. That ended that situation. In other words, what it's saying is, I don't want any more of that Elisha. And what he was really saying is, I don't want to go against the God that's around that particular man, Elisha. But that doesn't mean they want war as a country, because I believe the next verse will declare that. But we might recount just a moment, if we may, concerning this event. Always trust your Father. His presence is always with us. Doesn't matter where you go. If you're serving Him, He's with you. And He is not going to allow you to fall by the wayside. You may fall, but He will help you up. He is in charge. He is in control. And you need not fear or worry about anything as long as you use common sense. And we thank our Father for that. Now, verse 24. And it came to pass after this that Ben-Hadad, and this king of Syria, gathered all his host and went up and besieged Samaria. In other words, no more of the little tit-tat, man for man, small army. This time he's going out for the whole ball of wax, 25. And there was a great famine in Samaria. And behold, they besieged it. This would be, bear in mind, Samaria means Watch Mountain, and it was the capital of the 10 tribes, that's to say Israel, that went north. Until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and the 4th part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. Now, those would be outlandish prices, of course. In the first place, an ass is an unclean animal. You wouldn't eat an ass unless the situation present called for it. That would mean there was an extreme, a severe penalty. Now, as a student of the Word, I do not believe anyone has ever gotten to the point where they had participated with dove's dung as long as there was a dove still around. But it so happens that the Arabs call a certain little pea dove's dung, because that's about what it would taste like. Okay, I mean, it's not very good. And this would be about a pint of it. In regards to how you cooked it, it would give you strength, but it sure wasn't any treasure to have or to behold, all right? And it's plentiful unless there should be a drought that would bring a famine. Verse 26. And as the king of Israel was passing by upon the wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, Help, my lord, O king. And he said, If the Lord do not help thee, whence shall I help thee? I'm sure it was pretty desperate. Out of the barn floor or out of the wine press, there's nothing left. How can I help you? So you can see they were in pretty bad straits. Verse 28. And the king said unto her, What aileth thee? Question. And she answered, This woman said unto me, Give thy son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat thy son, my son, rather, tomorrow. Now, this really lets you know how desperate the situation is. 29. So we boiled my son and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, Give thy son that we may eat him, and she hath hid her son. Well, what kind of woman, I mean, stop and think for a moment. And spiritually, how can we discern this? We do not sacrifice children, not even for hunger, all right? And what people would, well, things can be pretty desperate, but I find it very difficult. Within myself, I find it difficult to believe that a mother could do this, so she would have almost have to have been impaired in some way, and I'll say no more about it, to have accomplished this, that she would allow her child to be boiled and then especially herself partake of it. There would have to be something wrong. Verse 30, and it came to pass when the king heard the words of the woman that he rent his clothes. I mean, this is awful. Finally woke him up. He rent his clothes, and he passed by upon the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. In other words, he was repenting. He was in a repenting costume, basically, if you would, apparel. And this is a little unusual for the king of Israel finally to get in such bad shape that he will turn to the living God rather than some stick of wood, as his predecessors and he himself had participated in at time to time. 31. Then he said, Go do so and more also to me, if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat shall stand on him this day. Verse 32, and Elisha sat in his house, and the elders sat with him, and the king sent a man from before him. But ere the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, See ye how this son of a murderer hath sent to take away mine head? In other words, he was looking for a scapegoat, looking for someone to blame it on rather than himself, the situation. Because a good leader would have had ample provisions and supplies put back for a bad time rather than whistling Dixie and burning valuable food to idols, all right? And remember that the son of a murderer, you know who he was son of? Ahab and Jezebel. And they had murdered, she had caused 400 prophets to be murdered. And they were not idol prophets either. They were prophets of God. Look, when the messenger cometh, shut the door and hold him fast at the door. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him? And in other words, hold the door. Won't be long till the master will be there. 33. And while he yet talked with them, behold, the messenger came down unto him, and he said, Behold, this evil is of the Lord. What should I wait for the Lord any longer? In other words, the king asked Elisha. Now, people today like to blame things on God. I don't know why. I really don't. But in daily life, people will try to blame things on God. They'll say, well, my son or my child got this terrible disease. Why would God allow that? Well, God isn't the one that caused it. When we put poison in a child's food all of his life, and unclean animals, meat, and an atmosphere that is polluted, and the normal flesh is mutated, that is to say in the sense of DNA, that some strange thing tries to grow or form its way or something because of the poisons. Do you think God caused pollution to come out of the stack of a car? I think not. And we dig oil from the ground, and thank God for it. It's, you know, that's what our putt-putts go with. It beats walking. But don't blame it on God. Every time something goes wrong, I think if you'll check, you'll find that it's man's fault. And many times it starts with number one. When you look yourself over real good. God gives man free will. And this poor woman used her free will to be sucked in by a con artist and to do such a terrible thing that it even shot Ahab's son, Jezebel's son, I'll call him. And Lord, it took a lot to shock him. But God will, God will get our attention when it gets bad enough that, and you go downhill and downhill and downhill without repenting or turning your attention to God and saying, help me, whereby then the blessings begin to flow and you're picked up. So remember that. When your life seems to be as hopeless as perhaps these people felt at this time, then know something's wrong, and it's not wrong with God. The very absolutely worst thing you can do is blame God instead of getting down to the nitty-gritty and figuring yourself out and what you're doing wrong so that you can improve yourself. And usually true repentance to the living God is the shortest route. Always think about it. Well, we'll pick this up in the next lecture. Hope you enjoyed it. All right, bless your heart. You listen a moment, won't you please? The book of James.